think most people looking at the title of this podcast would assume technical debt has a negative impact on in the age of AI, and that's perhaps where I was coming from at one point. But I love Steve's points around it can be actually AI can be the tool that helps you solve that technical debt or makes some of that technical debt less relevant than it might otherwise have been.
So welcome to the Impact of Technical Debt in the Age of AI podcast. What I'd like to do, first of all, is ask Dan and Steve just to introduce themselves, but as well as that, to actually take us through their real definition of technical debt, because I think it's really important to start this with off with a definition, because I think that will help frame what we're going to talk about today. Dan.
Thanks, Pete. Hello, everybody. My name's Dan Coleby. I'm the Director of Client Technology Value here at Advania UK. I've been involved with Advania for 10 years now, done a variety of roles, and at the moment my role is really to evangelize about new technologies in more of a pre-sales context and help customers really understand the impact that technology is going to have on their business, what the business case is for them investing in it, and the type of return they're going to get. And, I think business case and technology debt go hand in hand. I've seen so many times customers get into technology debt, and they sometimes do so with their eyes open, very willingly. They sometimes do so accidentally, and it can exhibit itself in a number of different forms. I think traditionally it was more associated with outdated coding and the way that the code that you wrote was interfacing with data and perhaps orchestrating process within that code. I've seen a lot of technology debt more perhaps in terms of infrastructure or applications. So an example could be, once somebody buys an on-premises server, for example, it is then fixed. That capability is fixed for a period of time, and the business case stacks up. You make that capex investment, you expect to use it for 3 or 4 years, whatever the expected lifetime of that piece of technology is, and after that point you should reinvest in it. Now, often customers stretch the lifetime of that hardware longer than perhaps they should, and so they're increasing their technology debt beyond that point, where ultimately that capability is not changing, it's not moving, it's not improving, and they can get to a position where that potentially holds them back from doing something that might have be related to that piece of technology or might be related to that hardware. So they're either consciously or unconsciously choosing to go further into technical debt by not updating and replacing that solution. I think one of the biggest benefits of cloud computing that we've seen come to the fore in the last 5, 10, 15 years has been that it's an evergreen solution. It's always changing, it's always improving, it's always being made more modern by the provider. And as the consumer of that, there are some downsides to having to receive what the SaaS provider is giving you, but the benefit is that it's always up to date, it's always changing, and it's always being improved. So, certainly at a very simple level, subscribing to cloud services and architecting your solutions around cloud, as opposed to investing in more traditional on-premises solutions where it's a occasional investment that then needs to be used for a period of time, is a good way of avoiding that technology debt. But I've definitely seen customers get into lots of technology debt. I've seen it cause problems strategically. I've seen it not be considered most effectively in a business case, because explaining why that technology debt needs to be repaid often isn't very sexy for the business. It doesn't have a direct, immediate impact or a direct return on investment. But if the technology people think about that debt in the right way, then they can build a business case that explains the implications of not repaying the technology debt, and therefore, enabling the thing that they actually want to do. So maybe a slightly lengthy explanation from me, but that's the kind of thing that I've seen in the past as well.
Steve, do you want to just introduce yourself and put your take on technical debt?
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Goodman. I'm Field CTO at Advania UK and a long-time Microsoft MVP. I've worked on obviously both sides of infrastructure teams on the customer side, and probably in my time both as a consultant. And as an IT manager, been responsible for some technical debt myself. And well, there is a simple explanation really for what it is. As Dan says, it's stuff that accrues along the way, but primarily it's where you have a choice. And going to the cloud is a great way of accruing technical debt. It doesn't stop that from happening. You pick a solution, there was a better solution, and you've accrued technical debt by picking the tactical solution and having something that you've got to clean up in the future, or putting in a new technology and not getting rid of the old one along the way. But sometimes that, just like Dan says, it's an intentional decision. It makes most sense for the business to do that. You wouldn't necessarily, I suppose, call some of the systems that keep the financial services systems in the UK alive today technical debt as such, because they do their job. And when they were put in, they were meant as a great solution. So it's not necessarily things that are old, that have been outdated and left behind per se. It is things that should have been, and there was probably a decision to say, let's leave things as they are and move along. And you accrue it as you go along. It's part of the circle of IT life.
Indeed, I think that's probably a very good way of putting it, Steve. Yeah, the circle of IT. Very good. From my point of view, obviously, I've been in this industry also for a very long period of time, and been involved with many clients. And I was speaking to one last week who have an IBM AS400 system still within their environment, still used today for reference. But obviously, that the information that's on there, the data that's on there, is in effect technical debt, because an AS400 is quite an old system these days. It's probably been superseded now by other technologies, but it's still useful to them. It's still obviously a great source of, in this case, controlling a factory environment and the work that goes around it. So for them, it works. For them, the technical debt is acceptable because to replace that could be a real financial burden to them. So for them, they've accepted that technical debt and are moving forward with it. Now, obviously, today's podcast is obviously about technical debt, but also how does AI then play into that story, and how can AI contribute, help, potentially mitigate that technical debt is really the point of where we need to talk about. And I'm just going to hand over to Steve, first of all, to get his view around AI and technical debt, and whether the two can work together, whether the two are mutually exclusive, in that, to actually use AI, do you need to remove all that technical debt? Steve, what's your view on all of that?
I think it depends on what the technical debt is. If we were talking about it, I suppose in like money terms or something like that, then we might think of debt refinancing, and perhaps that could be akin to using AI to help you keep some of the things that you wouldn't necessarily replace alive, because it could be code where you might want to use AI in a tool like GitHub Copilot, or perhaps something better, something like one of the more modern or advanced models that you can get from OpenAI, Anthropic, and others, to be able to manage that code. You could say, well, actually, that AS400 in the corner, we haven't replaced it with anything. It's still the system. In some companies, they might see it as an old system that still works, but AI could reduce something from becoming technical debt and actually give the business a reason to keep that on longer, rather than replace it with another solution, or virtualize it, move it to the cloud, whatever the solution is, refactor it, rather than rip and replace the whole thing. And that's something that would have been much more difficult some time ago, because you might not be able to get the skills to be able to do something. But you might find that some of your existing coders, they can do COBOL. If AI was doing it, they understand enough of it. They can read it, but maybe they can't speak it. And that's one way where AI can help. The most common kind of technical debt is when things are half done, where the last hurdle provided such little benefit to the business to do at that time. Like Dan said earlier, it's hard to justify doing something with it now. And That might be file server migrations. People move the home drives, and then actually it's the classification of files. We say AI, that's not necessarily meaning generative AI like you might use to help code in COBOL. That's where you might use classification that uses AI to be able to sort and move and classify documents, and actually moving that load of data like people's home drives first. And then when you're ready to adopt some more of the advanced features that Microsoft offer in Purview and tools like that, then that debt of moving those files across that might be on premises at the moment that were too much to sort and move around at the time, that becomes achievable using AI because it doesn't require that immense amount of effort from people to sort some of that data through. But those are still hard tasks because it's a lot of work to be able to have enough trust in the system to be able to say, well, actually, we're happy for it to tag and put this metadata on or classify this data entirely, and utterly correctly. And that's where specialized tools for classification are, really, really useful. So I suppose there's two. One, manage things, stop things that were perhaps seen as technical debt being technical debt, because AI can give it another punch to give it an extra tail end of the future, because it might be skills based, right? The skills aren't there to manage the old tech, and helping you sort through the things that you needed to move, help you find a solution or a solution based on AI that helps get rid of the technical debt. That's just a couple. I'm sure between us we could come up with hundreds of examples of how and why. And if we wait 6 months, there'll be even more, won't there? There's a lot of innovation around AI at the moment that anything that we say, by the time this even comes out, there'll be some more examples that people could think of.
Indeed. And Dan, just to take Steve's point's absolutely valid. And I've seen the use of AI in exactly those scenarios. But, is there a feeling that, let's take that file server example where your data is on that server, you've got data that potentially is, I don't know, 5 versions of the same policy, all of which date from now until, back 5 years, so the policy's way out of date. Would you say that AI can help us with that, or is that going to cause us some challenges?
I guess I've seen both, Pete, actually. So, I really liked, I think most people looking at the title of this podcast would assume technical debt has a negative impact in the age of AI. And that's perhaps where I was coming from at one point. But, I love Steve's points around it can be, actually AI can be the tool that helps you solve that technical debt or makes some of that technical debt less relevant than it might otherwise have been. The AS400 example is a great one where the generative AI can help you fill that sort of people skills gap or that people debt element around the technology. I think I've spent a lot of time recently working with customers on Copilot for Microsoft 365, which is obviously very much an out of the box generative AI assistant. And the point you mentioned about version management of files has definitely been something that people have struggled with. I'm not sure it's the strongest example of technical debt, but it's a really good example of where if you'd only been a bit cleaner with some of that data and you hadn't allowed those versions to perpetuate in the way that they have, then Copilot as that Gen AI assistant would be much more readily able to find the most recent version or find the one that it knows is absolutely correct. Whereas if you have an environment where you've let those documents, which are really the sort of one source of truth, become more diluted, then the AI is going to struggle a little bit to get the right answer there. And yeah, sure.
But aren't we blaming the users for Microsoft's solution not being good enough? Because timestamps, all sorts of different factors that show what the latest version of something is exist. And you're right, it doesn't take, you can ask it very specifically, and it doesn't always get it right. It's a new technology. Microsoft rushed it to market as quickly as they could to fill that space in Office before anybody else. And hats off to them, that's brilliant, but it's not perfect yet. So we could say, well, should the users fix it? Or should Microsoft, as they do, improve the solution to be able to
and I think
tackle those things?
I think they will in time for sure. But until that time comes along, then the debt that's been created by not keeping on top of those documents is causing a problem in that respect. And I think there's a similar parallel. We talked earlier about people still having on-premises file servers. Well, by default, Copilot can't connect to that data. It's designed to work with data that is within Microsoft 365. It needs you to have things like your identity in the cloud, and preferentially the data and the documents should be in the cloud as well. And if they are, they can be accessed by default by Copilot. If you have your data somewhere else, there are ways in which we can make Copilot see that data and connect to it, but that costs money. It costs time and effort and money to build the interface to those other systems. So I think that's a good example of technical debt you have created by not moving your files to the cloud. And then the impact of that is either that you need to resolve that and repay that debt in order to get the files to the cloud so that Copilot can see them, or you need to incur additional expenditure and effort by connecting Copilot to that data where it is. And in both cases, you've got work to do, you've got money to spend. There's as a direct result of you not having spent it previously. I think that's probably the most common case in which people will come across the impact of what technical debt has for them when leveraging Copilot in particular. But yeah, you're right, Steve. That I think as the AI solutions evolve so rapidly and continue to evolve so rapidly, then there will be situations where we don't need to go and repay that because actually AI can do that work for us, or we don't need to clean up all of our data because the AI can sift through all of the mess and find the piece of information that we're really looking for.
So, just being devil's advocate here, thinking of clients across the UK, they're all sitting there going, oh, okay, so I've got to move all of my data into the M365 cloud so that, AI can read it, can deal with it, can obviously understand and search it for me and provide the content that I need. My opinion, that's not necessarily the way we need to go, because I think we need to classify some of our data differently. Because I think if we did move all of our data into that M365 cloud, the costs of doing so would be quite astronomical in some cases. So we do need to have the ability to move some of that data off into different types of environment, an archive or whatever it might be, so that we're controlling costs. So I think, in that instance, technical debt, you could suggest, is that we've moved some of our data away from our live systems. But for me, that would be an acceptable technical debt, because that is in effect saving the client, potentially large sums of money. So would make perfect sense.
In that situation, though, is it that you're choosing to? You're not choosing to solve the technical debt. The solution to the technical debt, I suppose, is, I'll put it a better way, the solution to the technical debt is not moving it to the cloud. The solution is sorting through that. So you've got the thing that might go to the cloud into as your files or somewhere that you deem is appropriate for archive. And that might be Microsoft 365 Archive. It might be another solution that's more appropriate for your business. And then you've got that portion, and the technical debt that you had from before was having not done that sorting out. It wasn't the fact that they were on-prem or in Azure files. You just hadn't done that work. And that work often might involve people to look through and say, yes, those are the finance files that we need. These are the rules that we need to follow for this stuff.
And, you might well find that AI over time will have the ability to do a lot of that work for you. That's absolutely reasonable. But you're quite right. The technical debt there was not where the data was. It was the fact that the data was all, in effect, clumped together as a single entity. So yes, absolutely. That's another way of looking at it. And I think very valid, because, a lot of clients that I speak to have data that's potentially just all bundled together because nobody's ever had the time or really the inclination to actually get in there and sort it out. But for me, that's an important thing that we need to consider, and actually having technical debt on purpose in that instance, I think is the right thing to do, because it will not only remove some of the cost, but potentially it will speed up all your AI models as well, because they're not having to look through all of the data that potentially is historic and is not valid. You're nodding, Dan, so I'm assuming you're agreeing with that as a thought.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
In terms of AI and obviously technical debt, there's a number of other areas we could look at here. And one potentially is process. So if we think of IT processes that we all know and love, whether it be, management processes or whether it be security processes, obviously they can instill technical debt to our environment as well, simply because they're outdated and they've not kept up with the technology that we're thinking about today. Dan, have you got any examples or ideas around that? Could we use AI to rewrite all of our processes? I don't know. I might be taking you a bit too far now.
No. I think. Well, no. So I think the issue around process is twofold, really. One point I want to make about process is that AI is not the solution to everything. So if a process is fundamentally broken, you should fix the process, not try and put an AI sticking plaster over that process in order to make it look like it's transformed or make it look more, modern or relevant, etc. I do think AI can be the solution to a process problem, but if it doesn't take away the need for good old-fashioned process reengineering or process change, I think when you come into AI, the IT processes, and perhaps look at our own business, a big part of what we do is provide support and managed services for customers. That can often be a very lengthy process for us. That the time taken, if a user logs a ticket and says laptop broken, the time taken to get from a very broad description in that problem to what the issue really is, and therefore how we can push this resolution of that problem through the processes we have, can actually often be quite crippling. That sort of initial conversation of really what's wrong with it. Is the screen broken? Is the keyboard broken? Is the battery broken? There's something wrong with the software on it, etc. So I think processes like that are very difficult to change in a classical sense, and AI can really help. And whether it's helping to look across knowledge-based articles and find, suggest the solution to an engineer, or fully implement an automated solution itself, or whether it's AI talking to the end user to understand a lot of that information in the first place, then AI can really be the solution there to a process which has been very hard to improve from a classical process reengineering perspective. But I think there are other processes across businesses and within IT where AI shouldn't be the sticking plaster to cover up the fact that you should just improve that process in the first place. But there's definitely there's a strong linkage, as you suggest there, Pete, between technical debt, process debt, and AI, either that impacting AI in holding it back, as we've been talking about, or also AI being a potential solution to that, as Steve in particular has been suggesting on this chat.
Yeah, I can think of some examples in particular where SharePoint syntax could be used. And I'm picking things that are not generative AI, because generative AI is, like Dan just said, it's like a sticking plaster. People think they're going to throw a chat GPT onto the problem. If we were fishermen, we would be trying to take out chat GPT to the sea and throwing it into the ocean to see if it could catch more fish. That's how absurd some of the ideas people can come to us with can be when you think about AI in that context. I know that's a silly example, but it's fun to be silly sometimes. But in all seriousness, SharePoint syntax, right? Imagine you've got syntax here. It's good at document understanding. It can take unstructured documents and it's production ready, right? You don't have to build a whole AI solution around it. And maybe you're doing, as Dan said, reinventing the actual process over here. The process isn't that great, but maybe you've got 10,000 people using that process. And one is forms that need to be filled in, various different formats. It comes in, and you want to be able to adopt the new process as soon as possible. So old process continues, documents flow in, syntax reads them, takes out the things that need to be at a particular point in the new process so it can continue automatically. Now, again, may not be an AI accelerated workflow, just traditional stuff, simple things. It's because we've got machine readable data that we can use to make decisions out the back of Syntex. And then we've got new forms that are coming in with data as part of that process. And that's a good way of using AI as the sticking plaster while you're transitioning between two processes. And because it's paid based on use, then you're building it into a process. It's not going to cost you any more than the consumption of how many times it's used. The quicker you get off that old process, the quicker you're not having to pay for consuming the AI processing in Syntex.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to get controversial now, so please don't shoot me here. But could you see, I'm going to talk about the ethical use of AI, because I think it's important to think about the ethics related to AI. And obviously, what I want to sort of ask the question is, do we become technical debt over time? So do the people actually using the system become the technical debt and therefore part of the problem? You see on the news people talking about, oh no, it's going to affect all the people.
Well, yeah, this is where I think companies like Avania are far more important than Microsoft, because Microsoft is clearly has its views on ethical use of AI, which, often, right, say you've got, let's say somebody's going to write something that's not morally wrong, or maybe the next version of a spicy novel, or the ones that people, was it Jill Cooper or something like that? A publisher wants to get the latest one of those out, needs some help editing it. That is by no standards that any normal person would think is ethically or morally wrong, right? It's just stuff that happens. Microsoft are happy to sell to them, as would we be to a publisher like that. But there's a big focus on those things being the downside, the ethically wrong use of AI, but very little focus from large companies, all of the large companies like Google, Microsoft, and so on, about the impact on the workforce. So when we're thinking about the ethical use of AI, there's being happy with the customers that we are happy to serve. We believe in the missions and goals of our customers, whether they are defending our country or whether they are publishing interesting books for people. But we want to look for solutions that don't look to remove swathes of people from the workforce. And ultimately, some of the companies that do this, where they're saying, look, we've got rid of all of our contact center staff, they end up with unhappy customers. And those companies, by doing things the wrong way, by doing things at the wrong time before it's ready and useful for those things, are damaging their companies, and whoever advised them to do that, it probably wasn't great advice. So we need to be careful about how we use the technology, how it supports people. Some of the good stuff Microsoft are doing with Copilot is great. It's a Copilot, it's not the pilot. And going along those sort of lines when we're thinking about solutions, but sticking very, very closely to it, where we're not looking to do like Copilot agents. It's great. You can replace your entire team with one. Is the cliff notes of the announcements from Copilot, about Copilot a few weeks ago. By thinking about the right way of using the technology, by thinking of the impact on people and how that's going to improve our customers' companies, the people that work for them, the country that they live in, the whole world. Thinking about it from that point of view, we're going to do better. By thinking about those kind of ethics.
Completely agree. I don't know, Dan. Obviously, I'm referencing Terminator. Really, is where I'm heading with this conversation. But I'm showing my age now. But go on.
There are many unethical things that you can do with AI, and we obviously should avoid those. Things like influencing the outcome of elections, terminating people by killing them. Rather than terminating their employment. Or if you look at guidance like the GDPR gives, we should be cautious about making decisions with AI which will have an impact on people. I think, and this may be slightly controversial, I don't think that extends to protecting people's jobs in the way that they are today, in order to just avoid change in that area. To me, a changing workforce is a sign of a changing economy, a changing technology, a changing industry, and people need to embrace that change and reskill and adapt. I think, replacing people's roles, current roles, with AI, I don't see as unethical. I see that as progress in industry and business. There are, however, many unethical things that you can do which we should avoid.
Well, if you give, well, I'm not going to say you because I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, but if you give the wrong advice and you say AI is ready to do this and technically it works, the technologist side of you says this is brilliant, it works, but actually the way that people react to it, customers of a company saying, oh gosh, not another chatbot, I want to speak to a real person. A selling point of many customer contact centers for the last few years has been UK call center agents, for example, and another, it's almost like another offshore. Of course that's going to happen, and for some things it's absolutely fine, and you can't stand in the way of progress. That's, otherwise, I may as well be 200 years ago saying that the industrial revolution shouldn't happen, or we shouldn't have typewriters in offices. Microcomputers are going to destroy the world.
Indeed.
We shouldn't go to the cloud.
Yeah, indeed. And
so I agree.
Yeah,
Can I just
you've
make
got
one point?
to understand it well enough before you jump over that edge, right?
Yeah. Go on, Dan. I was just about to wrap up, but go on.
I was just going to say, certainly so far, and I appreciate we're still relatively early in this generative AI revolution. At least, I've not seen any customer or in fact any use case in our own business where the use of AI has been detrimental to the output, to the people that were doing that process, or in fact to the customer. Because most businesses I've been working with and I've seen, they've taken the time saving or the displacement by AI of that person and redeployed that person to be adding more value, to be doing more stuff, to be driving more value, etc. So, I saw it's a little bit AI, a bit more sort of traditional robotics, but they now have robot waiters in some of the restaurants in Centre Parks in the UK, and the impact of those robots has been massively positive because they can do things that the waiters find difficult, like carrying 10 plates to a table all at the same time. So really positive service impact is that you have a large table of people, they all get their food at the same time. But the other really positive service impact is that all of the waiters and waitresses who are working there get to spend more time with the customer, get to engage with them more, get to deliver a better quality of service. And they've not been made redundant. They've been redeployed in order to deliver more and to actually do things that they might find more fulfilling or more engaging, etc. So, I think there's countless examples like that, but I've definitely seen so far that kind of output as a result of automation through physical robotics or AI, etc. So I think companies are seeing the value of that as much as they are seeing that they could potentially save costs by getting rid of people and leveraging AI instead, which I think is a really positive attitude that companies are taking.
Absolutely,
as you said,
and I would agree wholeheartedly. Go on, Steve, quick one.
It's the way that you do it, isn't it? So I've seen reports where people are putting in tools like Copilot and they're saying it's made the workforce less productive. But the way that we've been doing, for example, Microsoft 365 Copilot has been supported by all the right change management. And that's the difference, isn't it?
It is. It's not just technology. It's one of these, and I'll wrap up if that's okay. But it's one of these big shifts in the IT world for me. If I think back to the days of the first time the PC came in, or I'm showing my age now, or whether the internet came in, for example, they were huge shifts in the way that we've all worked in IT. And I think generative AI and AI in general is one of those big shifts that we are, we're back into actually enabling our users with the technology rather than just putting the technology behind the scenes and hiding it behind whatever interface the users are using. So for me, it's a massive change. It's a big change in the world of IT. It will change the way people work. It will change the world of work for us all. But I would agree with both of you that that's got to be for the positive. And, it will refactor the way people do their jobs. It will have to, but it should make us all happier, more efficient, and more able to actually improve things rather than just doing the drudgery day-to-day tasks that obviously AI can take over. I think we're at time. So thank you, Dan, Steve, for your insightful view on technical debt. I think that's been really useful, a really interesting conversation. Apologies to the audience. I probably shouldn't have gone down the controversial route, but I think we could probably chat around that for a number of days. So I think we should probably call it quits at that point in time. So thank you very much for joining us on this edition of the podcast, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much.